Stop spending $30 on strawberry fertilizer. That 50-cent packet of dry yeast sitting in your pantry right now. It can help triple your harvest. But here's the thing. Most people use it completely wrong. Wrong temperature, wrong ratio, and actually shrink their harvest. I'm going to show you the exact recipe, the critical water temperature, and the 3 mistakes that kill your yeast before it even hits the dirt. A 2018 field trial from Iraq's Agriculture Directorate showed 121% more fruit, just from yeast. Here's what we're covering. First, why dry yeast actually works. The science is simple, and once you understand it, you'll never buy expensive fertilizer the same way again. Second, the exact recipe. Measurements, water temperature, how to dilute it, how often to apply. Grab a pen. This part goes fast. Third, 3 mistakes that will kill your yeast before it ever helps your plants. How to prevent slugs, and why this is completely safe around pets and grandkids. And I'll share a 60-year-old secret my grandmother used to outgrow every neighbor on the street. All of this in under 12 minutes. Let's get into it. My grandmother kept a small jar of dry yeast next to her watering can every spring. The neighbors thought she was mixing bread dough in the garden. They laughed. Then July came. Her strawberry plants were 3 times the size of everyone else's. The neighbors stopped laughing. They started asking questions. So what did she know? Here's the science, and I promise it's simpler than it sounds. Think of your garden soil like a giant locked pantry. It's full of phosphorus and potassium, everything your strawberries need to produce big, sweet fruit. But most of that nutrition is locked up tight. Your plants are standing right next to the pantry with no key. Dry yeast is your soil's locksmith. The scientific name is Saccharomyces cerevisiae, the same organism used in bread and brewing, and the science behind it is fascinating. You give it a little sugar for energy, it wakes up and releases organic acids, the chemical keys that unlock phosphorus and potassium directly at the root zone. At the same time, yeast produces a hormone called IAA. Think of it as a growth vitamin for your roots. It triggers your plant to grow thousands of tiny new root hairs, expanding the surface area that absorbs water and nutrients. Here's the proof. In 2018, researchers at Iraq's Agriculture Directorate in Najaf ran a controlled field trial on ruby gem strawberry plants using dry yeast at 6 grams per litre. The result was 121% more fruit per plant. Sugar content in the berries increased 3.4 times. Chlorophyll, the plant's energy engine, went up 70%. A separate 2023 trial, published in the Journal of Plant Production, tested yeast extract on festival strawberries growing in saline, high-stress soil, conditions most people would consider hopeless. The plants just single big through fruit per litre. In the chat, it wants that again that's still into the trial. The since the trial, which removed the fruit per litre. In critical trial, that are only priced together. The yeast filled most past, which makes simple in the years. The dry yeast is now, but never proposed. The different that still responded. with improved stress markers, higher vitamin C levels, and better fruit quality. And the cost? 1 litre of yeast solution costs roughly 27 cents to make at home. Compare that to $15 to $30 for a bottle of commercial strawberry fertilizer. The benefit to cost ratio of the yeast approach is roughly 20 to 1. Commercial fertilizer comes in at about 2 to 1. Here's the takeaway. Yeast doesn't feed your plant. It unlocks the food that's already in your soil. That changes everything about how you think about fertilizing. Now you know why it works. But if you get the recipe wrong, you're not helping your strawberries, you're feeding slugs. Let me give you the exact recipe. Grab a pen. The recipe is simple. 1 tablespoon of dry yeast, that's 12 to 15 grams. 1 tablespoon of sugar or molasses. 1 litre of warm water. Water temperature is non-negotiable. It needs to be 105 to 115 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about 40 to 46 Celsius. Make it too hot and the yeast dies instantly. Too cold and it stays dormant. Think of it like making bread. Same yeast, same warm water, same patience. Except this time, the dough you're feeding is your soil. Sprinkle the yeast on the surface of the water. Wait 2 minutes. Stir gently. Then let it sit for 1 to 2 hours. You want to see it foaming. That foam means the yeast is alive and working. Before you apply it, dilute the solution. 1 part concentrate to 10 parts clean water. If the weather is very hot, go 1 to 20. Never apply the concentrate directly. It can shock the roots. Apply 200 to 300 milliliters of the diluted solution per mature strawberry plant. Do this every 2 to 4 weeks, starting just before flowering through the fruit-growing phase. Stop when your plants go dormant in winter. This works in raised beds, in-ground plots, and containers on your balcony. If you're growing in a small pot, cut the dose by about half. I've seen gardeners like Linda from Texas, who is 79, doing this on an apartment balcony with incredible results. One more thing. Use your solution within 3 to 5 days of mixing. If it smells sour or you see black mold, throw it out and start fresh. 5 minutes to mix, 27 cents per litre. Apply every 2 to 4 weeks. That's the lazy gardener's way. Now, 3 mistakes that will kill every single yeast cell before they reach your roots. Mistake number 1. Wrong water temperature. If your water is hotter than 50 degrees Celsius, that's 122 degrees Fahrenheit, it destroys the yeast membrane. The yeast dies instantly. You're not making fertilizer, you're making expensive, warm water. Mistake number 2. Too much sugar, not enough fermentation time. If you add extra sugar thinking more is better, the excess carbon throws off the soil's nitrogen balance, a condition called nitrogen tie-up. Your leaves turn yellow, flower buds shrink. You lose weeks of growing time recovering. The fix is simple. Stick to the 1-to-1 ratio of yeast and sugar, and always let it ferment for the full 1 to 2 hours. The yeast consumes most of the sugar during that time. Mistake number 3. Applying yeast near the same time as a fungicide spray. Yeast is a fungus. Fungicides are designed to eliminate fungi. If you use a common strawberry fungicide within 2 to 3 weeks of applying yeast, you're wiping out your entire microbial investment. The solution is to keep at least a 2 to 3 week gap between any fungicide application and your yeast treatment. Don't mix them in the same sprayer. Now, the slug question. This is the number one concern I hear. Won't the sugar attract slugs? Here's the thing. When you ferment correctly, the yeast consumes most of that sugar during the rest period. There's very little free sugar left when you apply it. That said, if you're in a high slug environment, here's what works. Place a shallow dish of yeast and flour bait about 1 meter away from your plant base. It draws slugs away from your strawberries. Then, add a ring of crushed eggshells or wood ash around the base as a physical barrier. And here's what I know a lot of you are wondering. Is this safe around pets and grandkids? Yes, Saccharomyces cerevisiae is the same organism used in bread and brewing. It's certified food grade by the European Food Safety Authority. My grandkids can run right through the garden the moment I finish applying it. Just to contrast, commercial slug baits containing metaldehyde are genuinely toxic to dogs and cats. If you're choosing between yeast and a chemical slug bait around your family garden, the choice is straightforward.
3 situations where I don't recommend using this. First, heavy clay soil with poor drainage. Without oxygen at the root zone, the wrong compounds can form and you risk root damage. Fix your drainage first. Second, within 2 to 3 weeks of a fungicide application, as we covered. Third, in winter, when soil temperatures drop below 10 degrees Celsius. The yeast simply won't activate, and you'll just be wasting your solution. Get those 3 things right, and your soil's locksmith army will do the rest. Let's put it all together. Before I recap, drop a comment. Are you currently using store-bought fertilizer, or have you tried kitchen hacks like this before? Here's your complete game plan. Why it works. Yeast is your soil's locksmith. It releases phosphorus and potassium your plant can't access on its own, and it triggers root growth. University trials showed up to 121% more fruit with consistent application. What you need: 1 tablespoon dry yeast, 1 tablespoon sugar, 1 liter of water at 40 to 46 degrees Celsius. Ferment 1 to 2 hours, dilute 1 to 10, apply 200 to 300 milliliters per plant every 2 to 4 weeks. How to avoid the mistakes. Right water temperature between 40 and 46 Celsius. Stick to the 1-to-1 ratio. Wait at least 2 to 3 weeks after any fungicide. And, if slugs are a concern, put a bait dish 1 meter from your plant and ring the base with crushed eggshells. So what did my grandmother know? She knew that the best fertilizer was already in her pantry. She didn't need a chemistry degree. She didn't need a $30 bottle. She just needed warm water, a teaspoon of yeast, and a little patience.
Mix your first batch this weekend. Then come back and tell me how your strawberries respond. Your neighbours are going to notice the difference by midsummer. And when they ask what you're doing differently, you'll smile, because the answer costs less than a cup of coffee. If you found this useful, subscribe. I share a new gardening secret every week, and the video right next to this one shows you exactly how to multiply those strawberry plants for free. Click here to watch. Happy gardening!